And we are interviewing Major General Joseph McNeil. Joe, tell us something about your family background.
My family grew up in the segregated South, a place called Wilmington, North Carolina. And they faced many challenges because of their race and background and culture. My great-great-grandfather, William McNeil, whose spouse Mary, together the two of them, they were free black people as opposed to slavery. They were ardent supporters of the Underground Railroad as free people to assist their brethren gain their freedom. Slavery was an evil. And racial segregation that existed after the Civil War was an evil. Let's make no mistake about that. So my parents had that going for them, and they were able to advance because of the sacrifices of their parents who endured in the face of hostilities around the Civil War. My mother and father migrated north to New York because of job opportunities. Life, when I came along, was segregated. So there were separate schools for whites and black children. There were separate theater entrances. Segregation existed in railroad depots and stations. Segregation existed on buses. Segregation existed on something as simple as going to the beach. Motels, hotels were segregated. Segregation existed around us. It was pervasive. It influenced most things that we had to do in life. It required for extraordinary strength on the part of many individuals to lead and care for their families.
So you went from Wilmington, you went to college. Which college did you attend?
I went to a school that went on to become the largest historical black college, North Carolina A&T. I became a physics major. I became interested in the Air Force. I became an Air Force ROTC cadet for 4 years. And then I was lucky enough to be commissioned at the end of those 4 years to be an officer and a gentleman.
You became involved in the civil rights movement. How did that all come to pass?
I had gone for winter break to New York to visit my parents, and I was coming back to North Carolina to go to school, and it occurred to me that when I was in New York, I had exposure to all opportunities. I could sit any place on the bus. However, the further south we went, I became one who was treated differently, and it bothered me. So in the Richmond bus terminal, I went to a whites-only counter and asked for a burger, and they told me that I had to go to the rear of the bus terminal to a little section reserved for blacks to go to a window and get sandwiches and then go eat it elsewhere. That made me very, very angry. And I was determined not to just sit there and be an angry observer on life, but I felt the need to do something. So I went back to campus and I convinced my 3 closest friends that it was time to stop talking. It's time for us to do something, to take this challenge on and change it. And if it required sacrifice and other things, we should meet those things and take them on. So we decided to do what became known as a sit-in. It was a nonviolent protest. It influenced and impacted thousands of people. So the first student sit-in occurred in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I was a part of that leadership. Something I later on would look back with a great sense of pride.
Were you fully aware of the risk involved in doing this?
Somewhat, but not all the way. We were aware when a policeman approached us. It could have been an issue where he attacked us with his billy club. We were aware that we could have gone out of that store in pine boxes.
You planned this. You planned to go in, you planned to be nonviolent. Why did you pick Woolworth?
We were smart enough to make the determination that a national store was the place to start a protest because it was so pervasive. There were Woolworths in San Francisco, Boise, Idaho, New Mexico, Philadelphia, Atlanta. All these places had Woolworths. So if you're going to do something and influence people, you wanted to pick a national store where people in Harlem and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. could support your effort.
I guess, for the student today, Woolworth is something of the past. Woolworth's was a large company, and they went out of business in 1997. But could we not say that Woolworth was akin to, say, a Walmart today?
It was the Walmart of its time.
When you went into the store, you did something that I thought was really smart, and that is that you went and purchased a whole bunch of items. Why did you do that?
We made those purchases to establish the fact that we were customers. When they responded to what we were trying to do and so that we couldn't, our response was that we've purchased items in the store already. What do you mean you can't serve us? You've just served us. So we wanted to clearly establish that point. When I think of Woolworths, what I think of the people surrounding the first day's activity, how they looked at amazement that the four black students from North Carolina A&T refused to get up and leave when they weren't served. People started to watch. The news media became aware of what was going on.
How did the news media get involved? Because, again, that is another very smart approach.
It happened after we'd finished sitting. The photographer from the Associated Press, Jack Mobies, fine gentleman, took the pictures of the four of us leaving the store. And Jack asked the question, he says, "Are you going to come back? Are you going to be here tomorrow?" And we said, "Yes, emphatically yes, we'll be here. And we're going to keep coming back until you serve us." There was an elderly white woman who I guess was 75 or 80, really elderly. And she was in the store, and she sat at the lunch counter 4 or 5 seats from where we were sitting, Frank McCain and I. And she watched us patiently for, I would say, 30 or 40 minutes. And people came, and the policeman came, and the store manager, all telling us to leave. And she came and approached us and said, "Boys, I'm disappointed with you." And Frank McCain said, "Ma'am, why would you be disappointed of me? You don't know me." And the woman took one hand and put it on Frank's shoulder and the other hand on my shoulder. And she said, "I'm disappointed because it took you so long to do what you're doing." And
what happened on the second day?
The second day we had, you might call the reserves. We went back to campus and convinced student leaders and others to join us, to be a part of this change. The conversation would go like this: "I need your help. We're starting a protest, but if you're going to join us, you must be nonviolent. If you can't be nonviolent, we acknowledge your support, but it doesn't help us." We had to explain the risks as we saw them at the time. The fact that you might go to jail, the fact that you might be attacked. You might be attacked by the Klan or others. You weren't being paid. So you might later on not be able to get a job because of your activities. There were all types of risks that needed to be evaluated, and for a group of novices to pull this off was, in retrospect, kind of amazing. We were underestimated in our capabilities and our, what I call our staying power. The store manager commented years later that he thought we'd quit after the first day, and he didn't want to have us arrested because of the attention that would draw. But he thought of us in the sense that we were college kids of the time, not serious about much, and certainly not somebody who would sit and take on something big.
You're looking at, you've grown from 4 people to over 50, 60 people. Did they take up all the seats on the counter, or how did you work that?
We took up most of the seats. The third day we took up all of the seats. The third day was the day when a few elements from the white community joined us. 3 white co-eds from UNC Women's College came and sat down beside us, and they would occupy seats because they were white and they were given access to the seats. But they would get up and in turn provide those seats to black students, and that angered some elements of the local population. We had to provide escorts by members of the football team. They were threatened with dismissal from college if they continued to participate, so we thank them for their effort.
Well, by now the local law enforcement people are obviously involved. You've got the press there. What was the atmosphere on the, say, second and third day?
Second and third day were days when elements from some of the rural areas became involved. Hooligans. His main job was to provoke the students who were sitting in and who had a high sense of decorum. Well, these folks came along and they did things like taking cigarettes and grounding those cigarettes in the black students' coats, and lots of shoving and pushing, and the policemen did a mixed job. I mean, it could have been worse. But each locale in the country was different. We were happy to have police protection and expected it, as any citizen would. In other communities, for example, Selma, Alabama, it was different in terms of how the police handled violence or provoked violence, and were the ones doing the violent things.
How many days did the sit-in last?
The first sit-in lasted for 6 or 7 days, and then we started a negotiation session with the local store and the national headquarters, who viewed this as a local issue until it spread. The sit-in spread to 54 southern cities, which is phenomenal. Absolutely unpredictable.
Yeah, 13 states.
Spontaneous. And people who were friends of segregation were totally unprepared to stop this. The other key element was the economic impact. Over time, this was going to take a huge amount of money out of the system for Woolworth. The city was tarnishing their national reputation. So lots of things were being impacted far beyond our initial expectations.
Okay, these sit-ins were in the first week of February 1960. How long did it take before the counter was actually integrated?
Between negotiation and continual picketing, the stores decided to integrate in July. Interestingly, Bob, when I got back to campus after the stores were integrated in September, starting out the year as a sophomore, I've had some sense of obligation to at least go to the store and to order some item to see the response. I ordered apple pie and coffee, and quickly made the determination that the apple pie sucked and the coffee was horrible.
Was there a lifelong philosophy that resulted out of this?
For many of us, our appreciation of what we needed to do as a country. We believed in the Bill of Rights, those sentiments expressed in the Gettysburg Address, equality of mankind. We also had a strong sense that we were God's children, and that we all needed to be respect. So we learned those kinds of things, respect. We developed a keen sense of integrity You have to have a sense of what's right and be able to stand by it. So we were blessed to have experienced some of these things in life. It made us better citizens. It made us better people. As Frank McCain would say, this was a down payment on our freedom as Americans. And it impacted.
Let's switch gears and look at your Air Force experience. You finish at school, you graduate, you're commissioned on the same day that you graduate from college. Tell us about your commissioning.
My commissioning was a very proud day. My dad, my hero, my role model, was there to pin on my bars on one of my shoulders, probably the left shoulder. And my colleague, who was an activist at the time, Jesse Jackson, wanted to be a part of the effort, and he pinned a bar on my other shoulder. So that was the start of my Air Force career. I became a navigator. As an officer, experiencing many things that I had not experienced in the South growing up. The Officer Corps had made major steps in becoming an integrated service. The Tuskegee Airmen had made major contributions in getting black citizens into the aviation business. My first occasion to work closely with people of my age group, older, who were different than me in terms of color. We learned to build trust relationships. Some white kid from Alabama, I had to rely on that kid to make sure that my airplane functioned properly. And that kid in turn had to rely on me. The Air Force and the Armed Forces became fairer in their approaches, all for the good of our country. We learned to trust, and if there was an enemy we had to fight wars for, we put our lives on the line, just as white soldiers did.
President Truman stopped segregation in the military in 1948, and as the years progressed, I think what happened is that there was a mindset change where, in my experience in the Air Force, it was people didn't care what your color was, what your nationality background was. What really counted was, can you do the job and can you be trusted to do the job? We have a much stronger military today because of the fact that we all, as you said, work together and depend on each other. So you went to navigation school, and then from there you went to survival training. Tell us a little bit about survival training.
Survival training was unique in its days. We were at the early stages of becoming involved in Southeast Asia. But survival training was designed to prepare us to survive if we became captured by enemies. What I found interesting from my perspective of survival, simulated torture that we went through were much easier for me. My sit-in experiences. I had experienced harassment most of my life, so when they were trying to break my spirit, I had been through that. The Strategic Air Command was the command of prominence at the time that I was in, and our presence, the statement used to be, peace is our profession. We all felt that we were making a significant contribution to our country just by being there. Our presence and our ability to respond to hostilities.
So you were in air refueling operations for 5 years, and then you decided to leave the Air Force, the active duty Air Force, and you went into the banking world?
Went into the banking world, went on to graduate school, went on to become a citizen soldier, building on my background on active duty. I became involved for 34 years, much more than I really started out thinking would happen. Very gratifying. Great for me to grow as an individual. Great for me to be a leader.
You're holding down a full-time civilian job, and then as an Air Force reservist, as a navigator, you had to maintain the same standards and the same number of flying hours and activities as your active duty counterparts. Typically you would work all week, then Friday night you would show up at the base, and early on Saturday morning you would take off and fly to Europe or to Thule, Greenland, or wherever, stay over to Saturday night, and on Sunday you would fly home. You'd get home late Sunday night, and Monday morning you went to work. Is that not true? Isn't that exactly what you did?
That is absolutely true.
And you would do that sometimes three weekends a month. You were one of the first navigators to become a squadron commander. Can you tell us something about that?
Navigators were, at the time, second-class citizens. We didn't have access to all of the opportunities. The opportunity to command had to be coming about because of laws, almost like the segregation thing. We had to get the laws on the books, and then we have to be affirmative in enforcing those laws and concepts. You had to start up the chain of command as becoming a flight leader, becoming a squadron commander. A squadron commander was probably my most enjoyable or meaningful job, because you have the opportunity to lead people, to work issues, to work problems at the ground level in terms of taking care of your troops. The next one was a wing commander, where you led and worked with people from different backgrounds, maintenance officers, security police. All these people were a part of the team, and as a wing commander, the senior leadership counted on you to make sure that all of the assets were used properly.
Over 5,000 people reporting to you.
Over 5,000 people in the 514th Air Force Base. The medical evacuation teams. When Jonestown, a national tragedy, occurred, the citizen soldiers responded and were there with the active forces. Anytime there was an element involved in security and national security, the citizen soldiers were in a standby mode, ready to be full participants.
Your accomplishments as a wing commander were recognized when you were promoted to general officer, brigadier general, and then ultimately a major general. As you look back at your career and your activities in the civil rights movement, your success in the business world, your achieving the rank of major general, what thoughts come to your mind as you look back on your accomplishments?
I feel that I've been blessed to be a part of so many things that are meaningful, and to be involved in the early stages of making things happen. Fortunate to be the first in many endeavors. Fortunate to be a inspector with the FAA when I retired. To be a navigator in the FAA was unique. So I managed to serve both the military but also a civilian contributor. I feel blessed. I met some really good people. I think that it was appropriate for me to take a stand early on, to not just be an observer in life, watching things go by and not stepping up when injustice is done, but having made a difference. I got to wherever I got to, not solely on my efforts, but the help and understanding and mentorship provided by those who went ahead of me. Life's been good.
You've been an outstanding role model. The nation is proud of you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.